Noah's parents had always known Max was special. He was gentle with kids, smart and loyal. But this nightly ritual was something they had never seen before. It wasn't like Max was just lying quietly beside Noah. No, this was different. Max seemed to take his role seriously, almost like a guardian on duty. Sarah often caught herself watching the dog as he carefully adjusted the blanket, his eyes soft but intense, as if making sure Noah was safe from unseen dangers. One night, Sarah decided to stay up late and watch the ritual unfold from the hallway. As Noah's eyelids grew heavy, Max moved closer to the edge of the bed, constantly sniffing the air and looking toward the window. Sarah could feel a chill creeping down her spine, despite the warmth of the house. The dog's behavior was so deliberate, so precise. It was as if Max was guarding something invisible, an instinct she didn't understand but deeply respected. Dan laughed softly when Sarah told him about it the next day. Maybe Max thinks he's a superhero or something, he joked. But Sarah shook her head. This wasn't play acting. It was something primal, something animals are born with but humans often miss. Then there were the small moments, almost imperceptible, but powerful. On some evenings, Noah would wake up briefly, scared by a bad dream or a noise outside. Max was always there, licking his face, calming him with a steady heartbeat and the comfort of warm fur. One time, Noah's sobs woke Sarah, and when she rushed to the room, she found Max pressed close to Noah, as if sharing the burden of the boy's fears. Their friends and family called it heartwarming, but for Sarah and Dan, it was starting to feel like a mystery that begged for an answer. What did Max know? What had he sensed about Noah that they hadn't? The family's home was filled with love, but also a quiet unease, a feeling that beneath the surface, something was waiting to be discovered. Max's nightly ritual wasn't just a habit anymore. It was a sign of something remarkable, something that would soon change their lives forever. That night, as Sarah closed Noah's bedroom door and turned off the lights, she glanced down the hallway and saw Max sitting perfectly still, watching the door, waiting for the moment Noah's breathing evened out, waiting for the silent signal that his little boy was finally safe. And in that moment, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Max's nightly routine only grew more consistent, almost ritualistic. Sarah and Dan began to notice subtle changes in their dog's behavior that went beyond simple affection. Max wasn't just a bedtime companion, he was becoming a silent sentinel. One afternoon, curious to understand what was happening, Sarah set up a camera in Noah's room. She wanted to capture the moments after Noah had gone to sleep, to see if Max's actions were as extraordinary as they seemed. When she watched the footage that evening, her breath caught. The video showed Max entering the room quietly, just as usual. He hopped up onto the bed and immediately pulled the blanket over Noah's small body. But then something unexpected happened. Max sniffed the air carefully, his nose twitching. He circled the bed slowly, occasionally pausing to gaze toward the door or the window. His ears were perked, alert to sounds only he seemed to hear. More than once, Max pawed gently at Noah's arm, almost as if checking if the boy was breathing normally. The dog's eyes flickered with intensity, scanning the room as if searching for something invisible. Then, after a few minutes, Max settled down next to Noah but remained vigilant, occasionally lifting his head to sniff the air or glance around. Sarah shared the video with Dan, who was equally astonished. "This isn't just a dog being cute," he said. "Max is watching out for Noah, for real." To test their theory, Dan started documenting Max's behavior every night, jotting down details in a notebook. Was there a connection between Max's attentiveness and Noah's health or mood? Over time, a pattern began to emerge. On days when Noah felt tired or listless, Max stayed closer. When Noah had a sniffle or seemed unsettled, Max's behavior became more intense, pacing more, whining softly, or resting his head on Noah's chest for longer than usual. Even during the day, Max seemed drawn to Noah when he wasn't feeling well, refusing to leave his side. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Max was sensing something they had missed all along. Dogs have an incredible sense of smell, and some have been trained to detect illnesses like diabetes or seizures. Could Max be doing something similar without any training? One evening, Sarah confided in her neighbor, Lisa, who worked with therapy animals. Lisa listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. Dogs can pick up on chemical changes in the body, she explained. Sometimes they sense things humans can't. It's rare but not impossible. Encouraged by Lisa's words, Sarah and Dan began to pay even closer attention to Noah's health. They recorded his breathing patterns during sleep, monitored his activity during the day, and made notes of any unusual symptoms. Max's behavior became their unofficial early warning system. But it wasn't just about health. Max seemed to have an almost intuitive understanding of Noah's emotions. When the boy was sad or anxious, Max would gently nudge his hand or rest his head on his lap. He was Noah's steady companion through the highs and lows of childhood. One particularly stormy night tested their faith in Max's instincts. Thunder rattled the windows, and rain hammered the roof as Noah tossed and turned in bed. Max was unusually restless, pacing back and forth, barking softly, and scratching at the bedroom door. Sarah and Dan found themselves wide awake, uneasy despite having no clear reason. At 2 a.m., a sudden cough woke Noah. His breathing became shallow, and panic surged through Sarah as she realized something was wrong. Max leaped onto the bed, nudging Noah urgently, barking louder now, a clear alarm. Sarah rushed in, cradling Noah's small body as his breaths grew more strained. Dan called emergency services. Thanks to Max's timely intervention, they got Noah to the hospital quickly. That night changed everything. Max wasn't just a pet. He was a guardian angel in fur, and what they had once thought was an adorable habit was actually a life-saving instinct. As Noah recovered, Sarah and Dan began to wonder, how much more could Max sense? What was this extraordinary bond really about? They were about to find out that Max's loyalty and intuition would lead them down a path none of them expected. That night remains etched in Sarah and Dan's memories like a vivid dream they never wanted to forget. The storm outside was relentless, sheets of rain slashing against the windows, thunder rolling through the sky with a low, ominous growl. Inside their small suburban home, the atmosphere was heavy, though no one could have predicted what was about to happen. Noah had been restless all evening, rubbing his chest occasionally and coughing softly. Sarah assumed it was just a cold, nothing serious, but Max's behavior told a different story. From the moment the first crack of thunder boomed, Max was uneasy. He paced anxiously, his tail stiff and his eyes darting toward the bedroom door. Sarah watched as he sat at the threshold, ears twitching with every distant rumble. When the family finally settled down for the night, Max stayed close, curled at the foot of Noah's bed. But as the clock struck midnight, the tension in the house grew palpable. Noah's breathing changed, shallow and irregular. His small chest rose and fell unevenly. Max perked up immediately, standing alert and silent, staring down at Noah like he was waiting for something to happen. Then suddenly, Noah wheezed sharply, a sound that made Sarah's heart seize with fear. The boy's eyes fluttered open, wide and scared, gasping for breath. Sarah jolted upright in bed, shaking Dan awake. "It's his asthma," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "He's having an attack." But Noah was too weak to respond, his lips pale and his breaths coming in shallow gasps. Max leaped up without hesitation, barking loudly, an urgent, desperate sound that pierced the night. The dog nudged Sarah's arm, then Dan's, as if commanding them to follow. Dan scrambled out of bed, grabbing the phone to call emergency services, while Sarah rushed to Noah's side. Max didn't leave Noah for a second. He pushed his warm body against the boy, licking his face gently, as if trying to comfort him. Sarah grabbed Noah's inhaler from the nearby shelf and administered the medication, but Noah's breathing didn't immediately improve. It was clear they needed help fast. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but those minutes felt like hours. Max stood by the door, whining softly, refusing to leave. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, relief mingled with overwhelming gratitude for the dog who had sounded the alarm. In the hospital's emergency room, doctors worked swiftly to stabilize Noah. They explained to Sarah and Dan that the attack could have been fatal if left untreated. The family was shaken to their core. As Noah recovered, Sarah sat quietly beside him, looking at Max, who lay faithfully at the boy's feet, exhausted but calm. "That dog saved his life," she whispered to Dan. Dan nodded, still processing the night's events. Max knew something was wrong before we did. The doctors later confirmed what Sarah and Dan had suspected. Max's acute senses had picked up on subtle changes in Noah's breathing. Changes too slight for the parents to notice in the dark of night. This revelation sparked a profound change in the family's understanding of Max. What had seemed like a simple bedtime routine was actually a powerful, instinctive form of protection. Back home, Sarah began to observe Max even more closely. The dog's nightly ritual took on new meaning. When Max tugged the blanket over Noah, it was more than affection. It was vigilance. When Max stayed alert, sniffing the air, it was a warning. Even days after the attack, Max remained unusually watchful. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, as if aware that his quick actions had made all the difference. Sarah and Dan started sharing their story with close friends and neighbors who were amazed but not entirely surprised. Max had always been a special dog, loyal, intelligent, and deeply connected to Noah. But this night proved something extraordinary. Max's bond with Noah went beyond love. It was a connection forged by instinct and survival. From then on, the family never took Max's presence for granted. He wasn't just a pet, he was their protector, their guardian angel with fur. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of an astonishing journey that would reveal even more about Max's remarkable abilities and about the invisible ways animals can protect those they love. In the days following Noah's asthma attack, the household was still buzzing with nervous energy. The relief of having their son safe was mixed with a growing curiosity. How had Max known? How had he sensed danger when the family had been completely unaware? Sarah and Dan decided it was time to consult their trusted veterinarian, Dr. Mitchell. They needed answers, or at least some insight into their dog's unusual behavior. When they arrived at the clinic, Max was calm but alert, tail wagging as if he understood he was the center of attention. Sarah recounted the entire story, the nightly tucking in, Max's restlessness before Noah's attack, and the dog's urgent barking that had led them to the hospital just in time. Dr. Mitchell listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. Dogs have an incredible ability to pick up on chemical and physical changes in their humans, she explained. It's well documented that some dogs can detect low blood sugar in diabetics or alert their owners to impending seizures. What you're describing with Max, it's rare, but it's definitely possible. Sarah's eyes widened. So Max might have been sensing Noah's asthma symptoms. Exactly, said Dr. Mitchell. Dogs have an extraordinary sense of smell, up to 100,000 times more sensitive than ours. They can detect subtle changes in body chemistry, like the stress hormones released during an asthma attack or even changes in breath scent that signal distress. Intrigued, Sarah asked if there was a way to train Max formally, to hone his abilities and make sure he could help Noah more reliably. Dr. Mitchell smiled gently. That's something you could explore, but remember, not all dogs are trained for medical or other work. Max seems to have a natural instinct, which is incredible. You might want to speak with a specialist who trains service or alert dogs. Encouraged by this advice, Sarah and Dan began researching local trainers who specialized in medical alert dogs. They wanted to understand whether Max's behavior was purely instinctive or if it could be nurtured into a skill that would help Noah in the long term. In the meantime, they scheduled a thorough checkup for Max to ensure he was healthy enough for any future training. At the vet clinic, the examination was routine. Max was in excellent health, strong, and energetic. But what stuck with Sarah was Dr. Mitchell's observation that Max's behavior wasn't just about loyalty, it was rooted in biology. That week, Sarah reached out to a dog behavior specialist, Amy Clark, known for working with animals that have unique sensitivities. Amy visited their home to observe Max and Noah during bedtime. Amy watched quietly as Max performed his ritual. She noticed the same precise movements, the blanket tugging, the pacing, the way Max's ears twitched at the faintest sounds. Max is showing signs of high sensory awareness, Amy explained. He's alert to changes in his environment and, more importantly, to Noah's condition. His behavior is deliberate, not just affectionate. There's a protective instinct here that's quite advanced. Amy proposed a series of tests to better understand Max's capabilities. They would assess how he reacted to changes in Noah's breathing and stress levels, testing whether Max could reliably detect distress signals. Over the next several days, Sarah and Dan worked closely with Amy. They monitored Noah's health and Max's reactions, recording every response. The results were fascinating. Max responded almost instantly to subtle cues. A change in Noah's breathing, a shift in body temperature, even the faintest sounds of discomfort. Amy explained that Max's ability to sense these changes was a mix of natural instinct and intense loyalty. Though Max was not officially trained as a medical alert dog, it was clear he was operating on a level beyond normal pet behavior. Sarah felt a swell of pride mixed with gratitude. Their beloved dog was more than just family. He was a guardian, a silent protector tuned to Noah's needs in ways that humans couldn't always perceive. Dan, always the pragmatist, admitted he was beginning to believe in something almost miraculous. "Maybe we've underestimated Max all along," he said one evening, watching Max settle beside Noah's bed. Sarah smiled, stroking Max's golden fur. "He's always been watching out for us. Now we just know it." With new hope and determination, the family prepared to take the next step, exploring how to support Max's abilities so he could continue protecting Noah for years to come. With Amy Clark's guidance, Sarah and Dan embarked on a new journey, training Max to sharpen and formalize his incredible instincts. The family was determined to give their loyal dog every tool he needed to protect Noah, not just by love, but by skill. Amy's approach was gentle yet methodical. She explained that Max's natural instincts were already powerful, but with proper training, he could learn to recognize specific signs of distress and alert the family even earlier. This would give Noah's parents crucial minutes, sometimes even seconds, to act. The first step was simple, reinforcing Max's awareness of Noah's breathing patterns and body language. Amy introduced exercises that encouraged Max to focus on changes in Noah's physical state without becoming anxious or overreactive. Using treats and calm praise, Amy rewarded Max every time he correctly responded to a subtle cue. Sarah watched as Max blossomed under Amy's careful instruction. The dog was eager to please, his golden eyes shining with intelligence and devotion. It was clear he understood the importance of his role. Dan helped by practicing emergency drills at home. They simulated mild asthma symptoms and other signs of distress, teaching Max how to respond with a specific alert, a gentle bark or paw tap, that would wake the family without startling Noah. For Noah, the training was exciting. He loved being part of the process, proud that Max was his very own hero in fur. The bond between boy and dog deepened, becoming a source of strength for both. One afternoon, during a training session, something remarkable happened. Max suddenly froze mid-exercise. His ears perked sharply, and he darted toward Noah, nudging him urgently. Noah, sitting on the floor, looked confused but smiled as Max licked his hand. Sarah checked Noah's pulse and noticed a slight irregularity. His heart was beating faster than usual, and his breathing was shallower. Amy nodded knowingly. Max is sensing something. They paused the session and monitored Noah closely. Over the next few hours, the boy's condition stabilized, but it was clear he had been on the verge of an attack, one Noah hadn't yet felt. "That was Max's first real alert during training," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "He saved Noah again." The family grew more confident in Max's abilities. They began wearing a small alert bracelet for Noah, which Max learned to associate with his protective duties. Max's responses became more precise and reliable. Outside the training sessions, Max's natural routine didn't change. Every night, he continued to tuck Noah in with the same careful attention. But now Sarah and Dan felt a deeper sense of security, knowing Max was trained to watch for danger and respond with purpose. Yet, as Max's skills grew, so did the family's awareness of the fragile balance they were living with. Noah's asthma remained unpredictable, and while Max was a remarkable guardian, Sarah and Dan knew nothing could replace medical care and vigilance. Still, Max was more than a pet. He was their shield, their comfort, their hope. Neighbors and friends who heard the story were amazed. Many asked if Max would become a certified service dog. Sarah smiled but shook her head. "He's already our hero, with or without a certificate." One evening, as the sun set and cast a warm glow through the windows, Sarah found herself watching Max settle beside Noah's bed, blanket tucked snugly around the boy. Max's eyes were half closed but alert, a silent sentinel in the quiet room. It struck her then how extraordinary this simple ritual had become, a daily reminder that love, instinct, and a little training could make all the difference. For the family, Max was no longer just a dog. He was a guardian, a friend, and a lifeline. And their journey was far from over. News of Max's extraordinary instincts and the family's journey soon spread beyond the walls of their home. Sarah and Dan had quietly shared their story with friends and neighbors, but word traveled fast. Soon, other families, parents, and local community members became fascinated and deeply moved by Max's role as Noah's protector. One weekend, the local community center invited Sarah and Dan to share their experience at a small gathering. They were hesitant at first. Sharing such a personal story wasn't easy, but they recognized an opportunity to help others who might be facing similar struggles with chronic illness and emotional challenges. Standing in front of a small but attentive crowd, Sarah recounted the nights when Max would tuck Noah in, the frantic stormy night when Max's urgent barking saved their son's life, and the months of training that followed. Dan spoke about the moments of doubt and disbelief, and how Max's behavior gradually changed their entire perspective on what it meant to be a family, and what it meant to be a guardian. Max, ever the good boy, sat quietly at their feet, calm and dignified as if he understood he was part of something bigger. The crowd listened with rapt attention, eyes glistening with tears and hearts swelling with admiration. Parents asked questions, eager to learn if similar bonds could be nurtured with their own pets. Some shared stories of their own animals acting in mysterious, protective ways. Among those in the audience was Emily, a mother of a child with epilepsy. She approached Sarah after the talk, her voice trembling with hope. "My son has seizures," Emily said. "I never thought a dog could help us, but Max's story gives me faith." Sarah smiled warmly. "It's not about magic. It's about love, attention, and sometimes a little training. Max's instincts were always there, but we learned how to listen." Inspired by the response, Sarah and Dan decided to take their story further. They started a small local support group for families with chronic illness and pets, a space where people could share experiences and learn from each other. The group met monthly, slowly growing in size and impact. Through this group, they connected with animal trainers, therapists, and doctors who shared insights on the remarkable ways animals could assist humans beyond companionship. The family's experience became a beacon of hope, proof that sometimes the most unexpected heroes walk on four legs. But not everything was easy. As Noah's asthma continued to require careful management, there were moments of fear and frustration. Sometimes Max would become overly alert, barking at harmless sounds, or becoming anxious during storms. Sarah and Dan worked hard to balance training with ensuring Max's well-being, knowing that even a heroic dog needed rest and peace. Their vet, Dr. Mitchell, helped them monitor Max's health carefully, reminding them that stress could affect his ability to perform his role. One day, Sarah found herself overwhelmed. She sat in the quiet of Noah's room, watching Max curl up next to her son. The bond between them was undeniable, but Sarah wondered how many families could be so lucky. Suddenly, Max lifted his head and looked directly at her, his deep brown eyes filled with understanding. It was a moment that reminded Sarah why they had come so far. For Noah, for Max, for the family. "Thank you, Max," she whispered, stroking his fur. That simple gratitude echoed in the room, a silent promise that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. As the months passed, the family continued their journey, learning, growing, and sharing their story. Max remained a constant presence, the loyal guardian who never wavered. And the community they had built around them thrived, united by stories of hope, love, and the quiet power of a dog's devotion. Life had settled into a rhythm for Sarah, Dan, Noah, and Max, but the family's story was far from over. One ordinary afternoon, as Noah played in the backyard, Max suddenly stopped mid-chase of a fluttering butterfly. His ears perked sharply, and his body stiffened as if sensing something unseen. Curious, Sarah called Max to her side. But the dog remained alert, his eyes fixed on a patch of bushes near the fence. Sarah's heart quickened. This wasn't unusual. Max's senses often picked up on things the family missed, but what happened next surprised them all. Max began to dig furiously at the base of the bushes. At first, Sarah thought he had found a critter, but then Dan hurried over, wiping dirt off his hands. "Look at this," Dan said, pulling something from the earth, a small, weathered box, half buried and covered in dirt and moss. Sarah and Noah gathered around, their curiosity growing. The box was old, its metal latch rusty but intact. Carefully, Dan opened it, revealing a collection of faded papers and photographs. The family was captivated. The documents appeared to be a long-forgotten journal belonging to a previous resident of their neighborhood. The photos showed black and white images of a young boy, his dog, and a family much like theirs. Reading through the journal, Sarah discovered stories of friendship, hardship, and devotion between the boy and his dog, tales that echoed their own experiences with Noah and Max. The journal described how the dog had protected the boy through illnesses, storms, and difficult times, often staying by his bedside and offering comfort in the darkest hours. It was as if they had stumbled upon a hidden history, a parallel story that affirmed the deep bond between children and their canine guardians, transcending time and generations. The discovery stirred something profound in Sarah. She realized that Max's instinct wasn't unique, but part of a timeless connection between humans and dogs, a connection that had been quietly sustaining families for centuries. Inspired, Sarah began to research more about dogs with protective instincts, their roles in families, and how these bonds had been honored through history and culture. The family decided to create a small project, a tribute to Max and all the dogs like him who silently watched over their loved ones. They started documenting their own story in a blog, sharing lessons, training tips, and heartfelt moments. The journal they had found became a symbol, a reminder that love, loyalty, and protection were timeless. Meanwhile, Max's role in the family continued to grow. His alerts became even more precise, and Noah's confidence blossomed, knowing he had a guardian who was always alert and ready. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Noah suddenly looked at Max and said, "You're my best friend, Max. You always make me feel safe." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. That simple declaration captured everything: the gratitude, the trust, and the extraordinary bond that had transformed their lives. But just as they were settling into this new chapter, the family faced another challenge. Noah's asthma, while managed, had become more unpredictable during seasonal changes. The nights grew tense again, filled with uncertainty. Max responded with unwavering devotion. He stayed close to Noah, his presence a comforting shield against fear. The family leaned on each other, their love strengthened by every trial. Through it all, Sarah knew that Max was more than a protector. He was the heart of their family, a living testament to the power of loyalty and courage. Their journey had begun with a dog tucking in his little boy every night, but it had become so much more, a story of hope, resilience, and the astonishing ways animals can touch human lives. As the seasons changed once more, the family found themselves reflecting on how much their lives had transformed since that first night Max had tucked Noah in. What had begun as a simple, heartwarming ritual had evolved into a powerful bond that shaped every day, every challenge, and every triumph. Max was no longer just their dog. He was their guardian, their hero, and the silent thread that wove their family together. Noah's health remained unpredictable, but the boy had grown braver, more confident, bolstered by the steady presence of his loyal companion. Sarah and Dan often marveled at the extraordinary role Max played, quietly guiding them through the darkest nights and the scariest moments. The training had paid off, yes, but more than that, it was Max's unyielding love that made the difference. One evening, as Noah lay asleep, tucked in as usual, Max curled beside him, the blanket gently pulled up to the dog's shoulders as well. Sarah sat nearby, watching them both with a heart full of gratitude. She thought about the journey, the fear, the hope, the discovery, and the community they had built. Their story had touched so many lives, inspiring families to recognize the special bonds they shared with their pets. The blog they started had grown beyond expectations. Families from across the country shared their own tales of dogs alerting them to danger, offering comfort, and transforming their homes into safe havens. Sarah often read these messages aloud to Dan and Noah, each one a testament to the quiet heroes living among us. But there was one moment Sarah treasured above all. It was the night Max had saved Noah during his first severe asthma attack. The night everything changed. That night had shown them that miracles often come in the form of gentle paws and warm eyes. The journal they had found in the backyard remained a cherished keepsake, a reminder that the bond between children and their dogs was not just special, it was timeless. One afternoon, the family visited a local school to talk to children about Max's story. They shared lessons about empathy, responsibility, and the unique ways animals could care for us. Noah stood proudly beside Max, telling his classmates how his dog helped him feel safe. His confidence radiated, and the room buzzed with admiration. Sarah smiled, knowing their story would live on, not just in memories, but in hearts and homes everywhere. As twilight settled, the family returned home, their hearts full. Max settled into his favorite spot by the fireplace, his eyes slowly closing as he rested after another day of devotion. Sarah whispered softly, "Thank you, Max, for being our hero every night." In the quiet glow of the evening, the family knew one thing for certain. Love, loyalty, and a dog's unwavering devotion could create miracles. And that miracle had saved their little boy's life every single night.